The North Sea doesn't forgive mistakes. Ask anyone in Whitby Harbour, and they'll tell you the same thing their grandfathers told them. The water takes what it wants, when it wants. On a February morning in 2024, with fog thick enough to cut and temperatures hovering just above freezing, Thomas Harrington learned that some choices are more dangerous than the sea itself. Thomas was 53, a third-generation fisherman with calloused hands and a reputation for keeping to himself. His trawler, the Margaret Rose, had been his livelihood for 30 years. Every morning at 4:30, he'd leave his small stone cottage, walk down the cobbled lanes to the harbour, and prepare for another day battling the elements. This morning started like any other, until it didn't. The fog had rolled in unusually thick overnight, swallowing sound and making even familiar paths feel alien. Thomas could barely see 10 feet ahead as he made his way along the harbour wall. He was reaching for the mooring line when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. A cough. Wet, desperate, human. Thomas froze. The sound came again, from the rocks below the harbour wall. He peered over the edge, squinting through the fog. At first, nothing. Then movement. A figure slumped against the rocks, half submerged in the freezing water. "Christ," Thomas muttered. His first instinct was to look around, to see if anyone else had noticed. The harbour was empty. He could walk away, pretend he'd seen nothing. But the figure moved again, and Thomas found himself climbing down the slippery rocks before he'd made the conscious decision. The man was young, maybe late 20s, with dark skin and black hair plastered to his skull. His clothes were soaked through, inadequate for English winter waters. His lips were blue, his body shaking violently with hypothermia. When he saw Thomas, his eyes widened with hope and terror. "Please," the man whispered in accented English, his teeth chattering. "Please, help." Thomas should have called the Coast Guard. That was protocol. Instead, he found himself pulling the shivering man to his feet, wrapping his own jacket around him and half carrying him up the rocks. The stranger could barely walk. Thomas glanced around. Still no one in sight. The fog was both blessing and curse. "My boat," Thomas said. "Get you warm first." The Margaret Rose had a small cabin with a diesel heater. Thomas stripped off the wet clothes, wrapped the man in emergency blankets, and fired up the heater. He made strong tea. The stranger's shaking gradually subsided. His eyes followed Thomas's every movement, wary and grateful. "What's your name?" Thomas asked, handing him the steaming mug. "Rashid," the man said quietly. "My name is Rashid." Thomas nodded, not asking the obvious questions. The news was full of stories about small boats crossing the channel, desperate people paying smugglers for a chance at a new life. Sometimes those crossings went wrong. "You can't stay here," Thomas said, "but you need to warm up first." Rashid nodded, his eyes never leaving Thomas's face. "Thank you." The problem was, Thomas wasn't a man who made plans. He kept his head down, didn't get involved. Helping Rashid was already the most reckless thing he'd done in decades. But looking at the young man huddled in the blankets, Thomas knew he couldn't simply hand him over to authorities. Not yet. "Listen," Thomas said, his voice urgent. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe, just for a day or two, but after that I don't know. You understand?" "I understand. Thank you. I will not forget this." The sound of voices drifted across the harbour, other fishermen arriving. Thomas moved quickly, gathering Rashid's wet clothes into a waterproof bag. "Stay quiet. Don't move." He stepped out onto the deck. Jimmy Crawford was tying up his boat 2 slips over. "Morning, Tom. Hell of a fog earlier." "Aye," Thomas replied steadily. "Cleared up nicely, though. You heading out today?" "Might give it a miss. Got some engine work to do." When the other fishermen departed, Thomas started the engine and turned toward the River Esk, navigating to a small boathouse his father had owned. It wasn't much, but it would do. As he guided the boat up the river, Thomas allowed himself brutal honesty. He had no idea what he was doing. He'd just made a choice that could cost him everything. And for what? For a stranger whose story he didn't even know. But when he glanced back at the cabin door, remembering Rashid's desperate eyes, Thomas knew he couldn't have made any other choice. The boathouse appeared ahead, its weathered wooden walls barely visible among the trees. Thomas tied up quickly, then opened the cabin door. "We're here. It's not much, but it's safe. For now." As he helped Rashid inside, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just crossed an invisible line. Life had divided itself into before and after. He just didn't know how much everything was about to change. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel, because the stories you'll find here don't just entertain. They reveal the hidden truths about the choices we make when no one's watching, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The boathouse smelled of rot and old rope. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the wooden walls, creating bars of light across the dusty floor. Rashid stood wrapped in blankets, taking in his temporary sanctuary with resignation. Safety was always temporary. "There's a camping stove over there," Thomas said. "Tins of food, bottled water, toilets out back. You'll need to stay quiet during the day. The river path gets walkers." "How long?" Rashid asked. Thomas rubbed his face. "I don't know. I need to figure out what to do." He paused. "The boat you were on, where is it? Were there others?" Rashid's face closed. For a long moment, Thomas thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "The boat capsized. 10 kilometers from shore, maybe more. There were 12 of us. I don't know about the others. I swam until I couldn't. Then the current took me. I woke up on those rocks. 12 people. Christ. The Coast Guard will be looking. Maybe some survived, or maybe—" He didn't finish. Thomas gathered dry clothes from storage. "Get some rest. I'll come back tonight with proper food. Don't leave this building. Don't let anyone see you. Understand?" "I understand." "Thomas, why are you doing this?" Thomas paused at the door. Why indeed? Because he'd looked into a drowning man's eyes and seen something that made walking away impossible. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Just seemed like the right thing." The walk back through town felt different, as if everyone could see what he was hiding. Mrs. Patterson waved from her shop. "Morning, Thomas. Saw you heading upriver." "Just maintenance," Thomas called back, forcing normalness into his voice. By the time he reached his cottage, his heart was pounding. This was insane. He should call the Coast Guard right now. But then he imagined Rashid being processed through the immigration system, possibly detained, certainly deported. Didn't survival count for something? His phone buzzed, a text from his daughter Lucy. "Call me when you can. Need to talk about Christmas plans." He didn't call back. The afternoon news played on the pub television, and Thomas felt his blood go cold. Coast Guard teams are continuing their search after a small boat capsized in the North Sea. 3 bodies have been recovered, and 9 people remain missing. 3 dead. 9 missing, except one was no longer missing. That evening, as the harbour emptied, he gathered supplies and returned to the boathouse. Rashid was awake, sitting against the wall in Thomas's old clothes. "I brought food," Thomas said, "and blankets." "I heard the news," Rashid said between bites. 3 bodies, friends, good men. One had a wife and baby in Sudan. Another was a teacher from Syria." He paused. "Now they are dead, and I am alive. Sometimes I think I should have died with them." "Don't say that." They sat in silence. Finally, Rashid spoke. "What will you do now?" "I found a lawyer in York. She specializes in asylum cases. I'm going to call her, see what options you have. She'll tell you to turn me in immediately. Maybe, but maybe she'll have other ideas, legal ways to help." Thomas met his eyes. "I can't keep you hidden forever, but I can try to get you into the system the right way." "Why do you care this much? You don't know me." Thomas thought about that. "Because someone has to. I'm not brave enough to be an activist, but I'm brave enough to help one person. That's something, isn't it?" Rashid wiped his eyes. "It's everything." Later that night, Thomas's phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Harrington, this is Constable Morrison from North Yorkshire Police. We're conducting follow-up interviews regarding the capsized vessel. Would you have time to speak with us tomorrow?" Thomas's mouth went dry. "Of course. What time?" As he hung up, he realized the careful balance was cracking. The police were asking questions. And in a boathouse by the river, a young man waited for salvation from a fisherman rapidly running out of time. 3 days passed in careful routine. Thomas would rise before dawn, prepare supplies, and slip through quiet streets to the boathouse. To anyone watching, he was just Thomas Harrington, predictable as the tides. On the fourth morning, he found Jimmy Crawford standing on the path, staring at the boathouse. Thomas's heart stopped. He forced himself to keep walking. "Morning, Jimmy. You're up early. Could say the same. Been noticing you coming up this way a lot lately." "Engine trouble," Thomas said. "Huh?" Jimmy looked at the boathouse. "This place still yours?" "In the family trust." "Why?" "Town's changing, Tom. Development everywhere. Old buildings like this, they're worth a fortune." He studied Thomas. "You doing all right? You seem different lately." "Distracted." "I'm fine. Just thinking about Sarah." Jimmy's expression softened. 3 years now. Time doesn't heal like they say. He clapped Thomas's shoulder. "If you need to talk, I'm around." After Jimmy left, Thomas waited 10 minutes before entering. Rashid was pressed against the wall, eyes wide. "Just a friend. But Christ, that was close. This can't go on much longer." "Then let me go," Rashid said quietly. "And go where? You'd be arrested within a week." Thomas sat heavily. "No, we need a real plan. There's a community in Sheffield, other refugees, people who help. If I could get there." "Sheffield's 2 hours away. How would you get there without papers? People smuggle themselves across continents. 2 hours is nothing." That evening, Thomas used the library computers to research refugee rights, asylum procedures. The information was overwhelming, but he also found networks of volunteers who helped refugees, people who did this work openly, dedicating their lives to it. He walked home slowly, taking the cliff paths where tourists photographed the Abbey ruins. Down below, the harbour bustled, boats returning, families walking, the eternal rhythm. It all looked peaceful, but Thomas knew that beneath churned currents of fear and desperation. His phone rang. "Lucy." "Dad, have you been watching the news? That boat that capsized. Were you out that morning?" "No. Fog was too thick." "God, it's awful. 9 people still missing. Makes you wonder what they were running from." "Yeah," Thomas managed. "Makes you wonder." The next morning brought rain. Thomas found Rashid watching it sheet down over the river. "I've been thinking," Rashid said. "Maybe I need to turn myself in, claim asylum properly. They might deport you. But hiding here, it's not really living, is it?" Rashid turned to face him. "You've been incredibly kind, but I can't let you risk everything." Thomas pulled out a folded paper. "I found a lawyer in York, Helen Fraser. She specializes in asylum cases. I'm going to call her, see what options you have." "Why? Why do you care this much?" "Because someone has to. If we all look the other way, what kind of world are we building?" Rashid's eyes glistened. "It's everything." The rain intensified. They sat together in the dim light, 2 men from different worlds bound by a choice made in the fog. If this moment touched you, if you felt the weight of Thomas's impossible choice, then leave a comment with, "One life is enough." Let me know you're here, that you understand why some choices have to be made, even when they're dangerous. That night, as Thomas researched the lawyer, his phone rang. "Mr. Harrington, Constable Morrison. We're conducting follow-up interviews. Would you have a few minutes tomorrow?" As he hung up, Thomas realized the balance was cracking. The police were investigating. Jimmy had noticed his behavior. And somewhere in Whitby, the ripple effect had begun. Constable Morrison was younger than expected, maybe 30, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. They sat in the harbour master's office, the smell of coffee and engine oil hanging in the air. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Harrington," Morrison said. "You were at the harbour around what time that morning?" 4:30, same as always. "And did you notice anything unusual?" Thomas had rehearsed this. The fog was thick, couldn't see much, didn't go out, visibility was too poor. "But you were there at the harbour?" "Yes, doing maintenance." Morrison made a note. "The thing is, we've been reviewing CCTV footage. The cameras show you arriving at 4:28 a.m. and leaving about an hour later, heading up the River Esk. That's unusual, isn't it?" Thomas's heart hammered. "Engine trouble. I've been doing maintenance at my father's old boathouse." "Ah, yes. The boathouse. We'll probably need to check that. Some of the missing individuals might be seeking shelter in abandoned buildings. It wasn't a question. Of course. Happy to help. Morrison smiled. One more thing. Witnesses mentioned you looking preoccupied that morning. Any reason? Just wanted to get to work before weather turned. Right. Morrison closed his notebook. We'll be in touch if we have follow-up questions. Thomas left feeling aged. The interview had been polite, but the suspicion was unmistakable. They knew something. He drove to York that afternoon. Helen Fraser's office was near the cathedral, modest and quiet. She listened to his story without interruption, her expression neutral. When he finished, she exhaled slowly. Mr. Harrington, you understand the position you've put yourself in? Harboring an undocumented immigrant, failing to report a rescue, these are serious charges. I know. But what was I supposed to do? Let him die? I understand the moral imperative, but the law doesn't always align with morality. She leaned forward. That said, there are options. If Rashid turns himself in voluntarily, with legal representation, he has a chance. I can represent him, work with the church network. And what happens to me? That depends. If they don't find out about your involvement, you might avoid charges. If they do, she paused, you could face fines, possible criminal charges, and social costs. This is a small town. When can we do this? Tomorrow, if possible. But prepare yourself. The asylum process is grueling, and they'll investigate you. Your life is about to become very complicated. It already is. That evening, Thomas told Rashid the plan. Tomorrow, we drive to York together, meet Helen. Rashid paced the space. So soon? The police want to search the boathouse. We don't have time. They spent the evening preparing. Around midnight, Thomas stood to leave. I'll come get you at 8 a.m. Thomas, whatever happens, thank you for seeing me, for treating me like a human being. Thomas couldn't speak. He just nodded and left. But as he walked through the dark town, he saw a car parked near the bridge, engine running. The headlights flicked on. Constable Morrison stepped out. Mr. Harrington, working late? Just checking the boathouse. Storm's coming. Mind if I have a look? Part of our investigation. Now it's after midnight. Good a time as any, unless there's some reason you'd prefer I come back tomorrow. Thomas saw the trap. There's something you should know. About that morning, I need to make a statement. Morrison's expression didn't change. I think you'd better come with me to the station. As Thomas sat in the police car, watching the town slide past, he thought about that moment on the rocks. The choice had led him here. Arrested, his reputation destroyed. And yet when he closed his eyes, he saw Rashid's face, alive and grateful, and he knew he would make the same choice again. Some things were worth the cost. The interview room was sterile, fluorescent lit, deliberately uncomfortable. Morrison sat across from Thomas, along with Detective Inspector Walsh, a woman with weary authority. You're currently being questioned as a witness, Walsh said, but that could change. You have the right to legal representation, Thomas nodded. I don't need a lawyer. I'm going to tell you everything. So he did. The story poured out, finding Rashid, the decision to help, the boathouse, the plan to turn him in voluntarily. He left nothing out. When he finished, Walsh and Morrison exchanged glances. Walsh looked tired. Mr. Harrington, what you've done is illegal. Harboring an undocumented immigrant, failing to report a rescue. These are serious offenses. At minimum, substantial fines. At worst, criminal charges and possible jail time. Thomas nodded. However, Walsh continued, the CPS will consider your cooperation, your lack of criminal history, your intention to bring Mr. Rashid forward with legal support. I don't think you're looking at jail time, though that's not my call. What about Rashid? He has the right to claim asylum. Once we locate him, he'll be processed according to standard procedures. Your lawyer friend has a good reputation. Can I see him? Not tonight. We need to locate him first. Walsh stood. We're going to hold you overnight. Tomorrow you'll be formally interviewed and charged. I suggest you call your family. This is going to hit the news. Small-town fisherman harboring refugee. It's the kind of story media loves. Thomas called Lucy. Something's happened. I don't want you finding out from strangers. He told her everything. Lucy was silent. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to involve you." "But you could go to jail. Why would you risk all that?" "Because he was a drowning man, and I couldn't walk away." Lucy was quiet, processing. Then, "I'm coming up there. Tomorrow. You're not doing this alone." "Lucy, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. And maybe I'm proud of you. Terrified and angry and worried, but also proud." Thomas felt tears on his face. "Thank you." The night passed slowly. At dawn they brought tea and toast, then transferred him for formal processing. Walsh was there again. "The media's got the story. You're about to become famous. Or infamous. What about Rashid?" "We found him at the boathouse. He's been taken to an immigration detention center in Leeds. Miss Fraser is already there filing asylum papers." The formal interview was tedious. Hours of statements, photographs, fingerprints. Finally, Walsh told him he was free to go pending investigation. "Stay in the area. And prepare yourself. The court of public opinion can be harsh." When Thomas stepped out, reporters were waiting. Cameras, microphones, shouted questions. Lucy grabbed his arm, pulling him toward her car. Inside his cottage, Lucy made tea. "It's really happening. Everything's changed." "Yes, but people are supporting you. There's already a crowdfunding campaign for legal fees. Social media is calling you a hero." "I'm not a hero." "That's exactly what makes you one." The days that followed were surreal. Thomas's story divided national opinion. Some called him a criminal, others called him a humanitarian. The fishing community split. The town meeting about immigration became a referendum on Thomas himself, brutal with people shouting, fears about encouraging immigration versus arguments about moral duty. Through it all, Thomas waited. The call came 3 weeks later. Helen Fraser, her voice warm. "Thomas, Rashid's asylum claim is moving forward. The Home Office has released him to church housing while his case is processed. It's not approval yet, but it's progress. He wanted me to tell you thank you. He prays for you every day." "He's going to be okay?" "He has a chance. A real chance. And the Home Office is taking your actions into consideration. Your solicitor thinks the charges might be reduced to a fine and community service. No jail time." After they hung up, Thomas let himself cry. Not from relief, though there was that, but from the overwhelming realization that choices mattered, that one person could make a difference. Lucy found him there, eyes red. She took his hand. "Worth it?" she asked softly. Thomas thought about Rashid's desperate eyes, his quiet dignity, his gratitude that transcended language. "Yeah," he said finally. "Worth it." 6 months later, Thomas stood at the helm of the Margaret Rose, watching sunrise paint the North Sea gold. Life had found a rhythm again, though not the same as before. The charges had been reduced, a substantial fine that crowdfunding covered, plus 200 hours community service. Thomas served his hours at a refugee support centre in York, helping new arrivals navigate British life. The gratitude in people's eyes reminded him why he'd made his choice. Whitby had settled. Some still avoided him, but others approached with quiet respect, sharing their own stories of helping people in need. Thomas realized his actions had created space for others to acknowledge their own compassion. The fishing had suffered initially. Some customers refused to buy from him, but others rallied, seeking him out specifically. The math worked out roughly the same. Lucy visited more often now, sometimes bringing her partner, James. She'd become involved in refugee advocacy work. "You inspired me, Dad." And Rashid's asylum claim, had been approved. He'd moved to Sheffield, found work as a translator, was taking evening classes. They spoke on the phone sometimes, his English improving, his future expanding. Thomas pulled in his nets. The catch was good today. His phone buzzed. A text from Helen Fraser. "Meeting with 3 new clients today, all referred by Rashid. Thought you'd like to know your impact continues." Thomas smiled. His impact. He was just a fisherman who'd helped one person. But that one person was helping others, and the ripple effect continued. The radio crackled. Jimmy Crawford. "Tom, fancy a pint later?" Thomas hesitated. He and Jimmy had been distant since the arrest, but Jimmy was reaching out. "Yeah, Jimmy, I'd like that." As Thomas guided the boat back to harbour, his mind was quiet. The media had moved on. The town had absorbed his story. Life continued. But something had shifted. He looked at the harbour differently now, seeing not just boats but the human stories beneath. Every person walking along the harbour wall was fighting battles he couldn't see, making decisions that might seem small but could change everything. That evening, at the pub, Jimmy bought the first round. "I've been thinking about what you did," Jimmy said. "I was angry at first, but then I got to thinking about my own granddad, how he helped Jewish families during the war, hid them in his barn. He never talked about it much, said he just did what was right. You reminded me of him." Thomas looked at his friend with new eyes. "You never told me that." "Never seemed relevant, but it is now. History keeps repeating, makes you wonder what kind of man you want to be when your moment comes." They drank in silence, and Thomas felt something ease in his chest. Later, walking home, Thomas paused where he'd first heard Rashid's cough. The rocks were just rocks now, but he remembered the weight of that moment, and he understood it had changed him permanently. His phone rang. Rashid, his voice bright. "Thomas, I've been accepted to study social work at university, full scholarship. I start in September." "That's wonderful." "And Thomas, I'm organizing a community event next month, sharing refugee stories. Would you come? Would you speak about what you did?" Thomas looked out at the dark water. Speaking publicly still felt dangerous, exposing. But danger was relative. "I'll be there," Thomas said. He stood at the harbour wall a while longer, watching boats sway at their moorings. Tomorrow he'd go out again, pull nets, bring in the catch. The rhythm would continue, but it would be different now, infused with purpose. He thought about the title in those first articles, Why Helping an Outsider Was the Most Dangerous Choice. They'd gotten it both right and wrong. Yes, it had been dangerous, to his reputation, livelihood, relationships, but it had also been the safest choice for his soul. As Thomas walked home, he passed the Refugee Support Office, the church that had housed Rashid. Each building represented choices, people deciding to act, to help, to care. He was part of a larger story now, hidden in plain sight. His cottage was dark but no longer felt empty. He made tea and pulled out the journal Lucy had given him. Write it down, so others can learn. He'd resisted, thinking his story too small. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the small stories mattered most. Thomas began to write, about the fog and the rocks and the choice, about fear and consequence and unexpected joy, about Rashid and Jimmy and Lucy. And as he wrote, Thomas realized he'd spent most of his life trying to be invisible. But invisibility was a kind of death. Real life was messy and visible and complicated. The next morning brought another sunrise, another day on the water. But Thomas was different, permanently altered by that choice on the rocks. He'd saved one life and in doing so, saved his own. Not from death, but from a life half-lived. As the Margaret Rose headed out to sea, Thomas felt something he hadn't felt in years, truly alive. The danger had passed, but the transformation remained. The story wasn't over. It would never be over, because every day brought new moments of choice, new opportunities to be brave or cowardly, kind or indifferent. And Thomas Harrington had learned that the most dangerous choice was also the most human one, to see suffering and refuse to look away. The North Sea stretched endlessly before him, but Thomas was no longer afraid. He'd already faced the deepest waters, the ones inside himself, and survived. That was enough, that was everything. If you watch this far, it's because you like this case. Leave a comment saying, "I watched this far," so I can get to know you and know who really likes the stories on this channel. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of one person's choice. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people making extraordinary decisions. Remember, character is what you do when no one's watching. But sometimes what you do in those hidden moments creates ripples that change everything. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring, and thank you for being part of a community that believes one life matters, one choice matters, one act of compassion can change the world.